I learned from one of my early mentors that stress is a barometer for how far our thinking is from reality.
And I think like as the lies like continue, they get bigger and they get exaggerated even further and even further.
Welcome to the Awaken Man podcast. You join me and Mr. Peter Taylor for today's podcast.
Good morning, and it's good afternoon for you.
I know, I've made the jump, ladies and gentlemen. I have, well, just mainly gentlemen. This is the Awaken Man podcast. We have got quite a few lady listeners, but at the same time, I'd made the decision with Poppy to take the leap over to Dubai because we wanted to have a different lifestyle.
He wanted to live the laptop wanker lifestyle. That's what he wanted. He wanted to sit by the pool, take photos on Instagram with his laptop and his bare feet, pool in the background, little pina colada. That's the secret.
Yeah.
That's secretly what he wanted.
It's exactly what I wanted. But at the same time, in the first 2-3 days where we've been here, just setting up and doing the thing, spending time with Effie and Indy by a pool at first thing in the morning before my working day, when I've already done like 2-3 hours of creation work, I don't know, I walk to the local mall. It's got great coffee, a Barber's, Carrefour, and really nice cafes. Pete, you're gonna love it over here, bro.
Yeah, whereas over in England at the moment, it's -6. It is freaking freezing. My house, even though the heating's on full blast, still cold. I trained in the gym this morning, right? And my gym may as well be outside.
Yeah.
It's so cold. It was atrocious.
Just one little point, part of the agreement that we get with the villa. So we rented our house out for the same price that we're paying for this villa here. And we get a pool, tennis courts, basketball court, all outside, and a gym, which you'd be paying like £100 or something a month for at home, all included in the rent. And I was like, this is a freaking no-brainer. It's unreal. It's like, I can't even believe it. So yeah, that's, a lot of work's gone into getting us here. And I've had a lot of, I could do a whole podcast on that. And if you'd be interested, I would love to share all I've learned from setting up the business in Dubai and stuff like that. But that's not what today's podcast is about. Today's podcast is about lying.
Why are you lying?
What you're lying for. Oh, this is something I went in a big binge on, probably my early 20s. Did a really big personal development binge on lying, and how not just I noticed in myself, but I noticed in the people that I worked with that lying was a really big issue, like a really big issue. And lying was crippling not just their weight. Obviously, early part of my coaching career, I coached a lot around body transformation. And a lot of my clients really struggled to get weight loss results because they were not telling the truth. So in today's podcast, we're going to tread two lines. We're going to talk about telling the truth and lying. So we're going to start off with a bit about truth telling, and then we're going to go into about lying, because I found that it was a really big struggle for me to work. I was like, hang on a second. Some of the reasons why my clients aren't getting results is because they're lying to me, and I'll show you the levels of which that people lie, especially if you're a consultant or you're a coach listening to this. And it's not always from a bad place. This is something that comes from a real place of empathy. The second of all, when I started seeing it in my clients, I was like, hang on a second, where am I doing this? Where am I lying?
Okay, guys. So on today's talk, Ben's going to do most of the talking, right? He has created this training, this podcast. We've got a document. Are there certain levels? Like, how many levels are we going to talk about?
There's 4 levels of truth telling. Okay, and if you've read Conversations with God, it's not actually a religious book. It's a really, really good book, but it talks about this idea of this 4 levels of telling the truth. Okay, and I put on the document, and if you want the document, by the way, and you're listening to this podcast, I'm more than happy to send it to you. Just get in touch with us. It's really, really helpful. Is that an awakened man tells the truth. And this is something that I'm learning as I'm going through my journey as, trying to become an awakened man. There's the 4 levels of telling the truth that I really go from. Is first one, he tells the truth to himself about himself. Now, if I can't be honest with how I'm feeling and how I'm showing up and the standards I'm holding myself to, that's the first truth that I've got to be able to tell. And
so you're not lying to yourself.
Yeah, it's like, I think sometimes me and people having a conversation last night, and I just asked you, like, how do you feel about this? And you were honest about it. I'm really pissed off about this. I don't feel great about this. And we had that conversation. It's like, I don't feel unhappy about this. And you were honest about that. And you're actually being honest to that's the second level of truth telling. But the first thing is like, sometimes I think as guys, we live in this place where we tell ourselves a bullshit story. Like, yeah, I'm all right with it. it. It's like bullshit. I'm not happy with the standards I'm accepting of myself in my life right now. And if you remember back to, so on our retreat, the Awaken Man retreat, we did an exercise where we had to beat 7 bells of shit out of a punch bag with a bat. It's way more, there's a lot more to it than that.
It's good
And
fun.
it was, yeah. One of the things I did, I was beating a story that I was accepting a low level of standards in my life. And I just really, and that was part of me being truthful, saying, I'm really not fucking accepting this anymore. And so that's the first level. Like, once a man can get really, really honest and start telling the truth about really what he is feeling about himself, because like a lot of it, if you look at a lot of things with addiction or even depression, the first point of change is acceptance. It's like, I'm actually, do you know what? I'm depressed. I'm an alcoholic. I've got a porn addiction. And when you have that breakthrough, that is when your life changes. So that leads us into this. Pete, you're going to have to just interrupt at any point, brother, because I'm going to get on a roll here. So the
Yeah.
second
Okay.
level,
So first level is level 1, being able to tell the truth to yourself.
yeah, getting really honest, accepting what's the status quo. It's like, yeah, actually, I need some help. Or yeah, it's generally that is the first level. Like, I always say to a lot of clients, the first point of change is awareness. I'm aware of this, right? Okay, I'm honest. Let's start making some change. Then we move into the second level. He tells the truth about himself to another. So this is where I'm starting to I've accepted that I need help, or I'm accepted that I'm not happy with the standards that I'm creating in my life, and then I'm willing to go and tell you about it. Now that's hard. We just referenced before, we were on a conversation last night. It's like, Pete is an incredible operations genius, and we were talking about how there's so much of the master plan that he's created he's put on his plate, and we were just having a really good candid conversation about that, and he was able to tell me about that truth. He was like, yeah, do you know what, this is really affecting this, or this is going this way, or I need more time here. And that is the second level of truth telling. He's like, here's my truth, this is how I feel about things, I'm expressing this. And I can speak for myself, Pete, but the work that I did with Tim was largely about expressing my feelings, and that was a big thing for me. I didn't express my feelings. I could feel an emotion like anger or frustration, but it would be days before I'd express it. And was it similar for you?
Yeah, I mean, so that level of truth telling, the second level, yeah, I haven't mastered that yet. I have to say, like, that's, you asked me a question yesterday and then I told you the truth, but like you drew that out of me, right? Actually, I think this is probably this is the next level, right? Is that I'm then vocal about it before it
Yeah,
being
yeah.
drawn out.
Yeah, so like that's exactly that. You're able to say, do you know what, Ben, can I have 2 minutes? Listen, I'm pissed off about this. I'm not happy about this. I'm really happy about this. And even, it's speaking largely in the negative. It's like he tells the truth about himself to another. We did acknowledgements on the Awakened Man over the last 2-3 weeks. And some of the men were not even be able to speak the truth about how freaking awesome they are at what are the parts of their life to another man. They couldn't express that. They couldn't tell another man how they were ace, or they did really well, or all the great parts. They really struggled. They felt so contracted around it. It was a big step for a lot of these guys, right? So that's the second level of truth telling. The third one is he tells the truth about others to themselves. So that's like we referenced, you seem to being great at this sort of stuff. He is very good at this. He will hold a mirror up to you all the time. He's like, this is how you're showing up. This is how you're showing up. Can you see this? Can you see this? His actual the way he vocalizes this in his coaching is, can you see that? Can you see that? And that is the vulnerability. We talk about this in Radical Candor. And if you listen to the Radical Candor podcast, this is caring personally challenged directly. And there is, and we're going to go into lying and white lies especially, is that people say, oh, it's a little white lie to save someone's feelings, but this is the level of truth telling they're avoiding. It's like, I can't tell Pete how I can see him showing up because I'm worried about what he's going to think of me. I can't get honest with him. And in an organization, in a coaching relationship, in a friendship, if I can't be honest with him, that means I'm not accessing this level of truth telling. Yeah, just listen to the Radical Candor podcast. It's really, really good. And honestly, when I first started looking into this, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, there was so often I'd go, yeah, that's great. I was trying to be the positive, happy coach who never said anything negative, like quote unquote inherently negative. But what I noticed is that I would not get in and really start telling the truth to people. And as my coaching, and I've become a much better coach, I'm very, very honest with people. And I say to people like this exactly, like this, I'll be just literally, oh, can you see how you're showing up here? Can I just point something out to you? And even this morning, I texted a client and said, can you see how you're showing up here? And got thanked for it. Oh my gosh, I can see that. Thank you so much for telling me this. And then the fourth level is an awakened man tells the truth to everyone. Now, this is a standard that is unachievable. It is a little bit like an awakened man, right? I think this is the standard which we all strive for, like being awakened. It's not a destination, it's a direction. But he tells the truth to everyone. It's just like I'm gonna go all in on telling the truth about it. Honestly, 2023, if you made it your New Year's resolution to tell the truth more often, your life would change exponentially. Like it would massively shift.
Well, it'll be a whole year of having really hard conversations, probably, right? In
I
fact,
think
going through some fear doors.
Yeah, like you know, already in this episode we've mentioned the Radical Candor podcast. I'd go back and listen to that. The hard conversations, as Pete just mentioned. I was having a conversation with one of our men. Like he had 3 hard conversations that he's got to make this week, and it's all it is expressing, telling the truth about how he feels and some opportunities that he can make the most of in his life. And his life is going to shift in a week. So that's the 4 levels of truth telling, and I think that's like to acknowledge it. I'm going to go through them quite quickly, so I'll run through them again because I think it's important. Really, first one is telling the truth to yourself about yourself. Get honest, get acceptance, start to say, yeah, do you know what, I'm not happy with this. Then you start to vocalize it to someone else. Like, I'm actually feeling like this. For a lot of guys, this is getting help. To be honest, this is saying like, do you know what, I need help with my business. I need help for my relationship. It could be I need help with, and it's going to someone else saying, do you know what, I really need help. The third level of truth telling is telling someone else about themselves. Like, oh, by the way, you know, this is how I can see you showing up in your life right now. Just an observation. And then the fourth level is tell the truth to everyone. And that was the telling the truth part. Now, when you start getting into this, it's like lying is a real big problem in the human condition. Now, what I mean by this is that I learned from one of my early mentors that stress is a barometer for how far our thinking is from reality. Now, I'll say that again because it's a mind-blowing concept. When you really understand this, I remember I've mentioned it on previous episodes, when you get really, really clear that the more stressed you are, the more you're not accepting your current reality. So I say to Pete, I have done 5 sales calls today. Pete, I've done 5 sales calls this morning, when in fact I've done 1. What I've done is I've just created a gap between the reality and what I'm experiencing. Now, there's so many problems when I start telling lies. And the first one is the worry about being found out, because that grows and grows and grows and it never really goes away. The second thing is that I have to keep a mental account of all the lies that I've told. And like, I was like, oh my God, what have I told him? What have I told them? I'm going to tell this. This was the lie that I was telling. When I realized this, I used to lie about my 800 meter time. I used to lie about the 800 meter time. People would ask me and I would say, oh yeah, it was this or it was this. And I was just doing it to inflate my... Are you, Pete, have you ever lied about what you can bench?
I think probably back in the day, yeah. Yeah. Now I don't even know what I can bench. Probably not a
Yeah.
fucking lot. But I was just thinking about this when you were saying this, and I would be intrigued to know from your standpoint, because in your prior career, you had both male and female clients, right? Where I'm going with this is I think men lie from a status point of view, right?
100%. Ego.
Right. Whereas, and because typically for a lot of guys, core emotion for a man, we want higher status, you know, fast cars, Rolexes, yada, 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 hot wife and so on, right? It's status, more money. Whereas for female, it's typically not status. It's something different, security. So, you know, I'm intrigued whether you could think back to your clients in your previous role and whether you were able to spot whether the men were lying more than the women.
I don't know, actually, maybe come back to that question in a second, because we're going to go through the levels of lying, and I think that it'll explain quite a lot. And actually, do you know what? I had a client, and he said to me one day, do you know what, Ben? I've got to be honest with you. The irony, I'm a liar. I'm a real liar. I lie about stuff, and it's really getting in the way of me. He told me that actually what happened one day is that he was an architect and he lied about a piece of work. And he said it wasn't with a client because his sister had died. And then his wife was walking along the road in the local town. And this client came up to his wife and said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about his ex and wife's, his sister dying. And she just gave it like, he didn't even have a sister. I was like, we laughed about it, and even though as I'm telling that, but it was a real big part of our relationship is like helping him to understand that he could be truthful with me about the way that he was eating, or what he was and wasn't doing, and that took about 2 years in our coaching relationship. And again, like a lot of this, what I learned about lying was from working with this client and actually realizing that it was getting in the way of my consultancy, my coaching, and my training with him. And this is why I learned so much about it, because I was fascinated about this and the stresses that are involved with that. I think about the times where we've talked about you and your business. There's where lies have been told, and you're like, well, where do I stand with this? Do I even believe that person anymore? Like, can I trust what's just been told to me? Can I actually act on the information I've just been given? And it makes it really, really difficult. It does. Like, like we were talking a while ago, it's like a sale is only a sale when the cash is in the bank. Like, don't tell me you've made 5 sales today when the cash isn't in the bank, because I can't believe you. Because if I go and then account and go and purchase something based on you haven't made 5 sales, when that cash doesn't arrive because you're lying to me, because you're exaggerating, that's a problem. That's a real big problem in the business. And that's what I was like, we had this discussion because I actually said that. I was like, yeah, Pete, it's a sale. And you're like, great. And it wasn't a sale. And you're like, dude, I need to be honest with you. Don't do that. Make sure it's in the bank before we call it a sale. That was so helpful for me. Like, oh yeah, I exaggerated that. It wasn't in my world, in my head, the sale was guaranteed, but it wasn't, because it wasn't in the bank. And it is lying. It sounds a bit harsh calling it a lie, but I think it is. So what I want to go, do you want to share anything before we jump into the myth, truths, and the lying?
I think I'll probably share as we go along, because like I've seen this firsthand, and I think like as the lies like continue, they get bigger and they get exaggerated even further and even further, and then it goes from like in a business sense, like a £10,000 lie to £100,000 lie to like £1,000,000 lie, and the stakes are so much bigger. And I don't know whether this like is the case, but if you're like an excessive liar, whether you start believing those lies yourself.
Yeah, I think you have to buy in your own lies. So let's jump into like what, in terms of lying, why stopping your lying and being really present with this is going to change your life, right? So think about this: is if you're paying a trainer or a consultant or a coach for some reason and you're lying to them, they can only act on the information they're given. And I saw this in weight loss. I would sit with people and what would happen is that they would lie, and they didn't mean to lie. No, so this is the first level of lying. Hey,
Okay, so
Mary,
how many levels of lying are there? 3
there
levels.
are 3 levels of lying on today's call. Yeah, and we
Okay.
could go into
Okay. So
more.
we're about to talk through the 3 levels of lying.
We're going to go through the 3 levels of lying. Okay, so the first one is the myths, truths from a place of not knowing. Now, what this means is I'm telling my truth, but I'm actually not educated in what I'm telling you about. So I would not understand, like I would report like not understanding the metrics properly. So for example, I would say to someone, hey, have you eaten, how are you getting on with your protein? And they'll say, oh yeah, I'm eating loads of protein. In their mind, eating chicken breast every night is loads of protein, but they didn't understand that they needed to eat 100 grams of protein a day, for example, because they just didn't understand the subject. I always say there's like people often in nutrition, we're playing a game where they don't know the rules. You'll say, how's your sales activity coming along? And to them, picking up the phone twice in that week is a lot. So yeah, it's great. So that's the first level of lying. They're not trying to actually mislead you, but their own perception of what it's a mistruth. Yeah. And I worked with a lawyer once whose policy for this was first error, where they have this mistruth. It's a training issue. I haven't trained them. So for example, if Pete's doing consultancy with someone on their sales and he says, how are you doing with your sales? And they're like, yeah, it's really, really great. And he digs in a little bit and then picking up the phone 3 times, it's Pete's issue. So he'd claim responsibility. By the way, Steve, 3 pickups, it's fuck all. You need to be on the phone for at least 2 hours a day. Yeah, that's it. And that's what he would claim the first error. The second error is a learning error. So Steve, you obviously haven't got this in your calendar. Let's put it in the calendar. And then the third error is, he's taught it. The person has had a learning issue. And then the third error would be a written warning. So it's like first is a responsibility for us, second error responsibility for them, and then the third would be a written warning. And she said she ran her law practice like this, and it's phenomenal.
I
She'd
love
have
that.
massive,
That's a great framework. That's a phenomenal
great
framework.
framework. Oh, she was a savage. Honestly, one of the best clients I've ever had.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Guys, if you're running businesses, take that framework. So first
yeah,
error, training issue. You take responsibility. Second error, it's a learning issue. They have to take responsibility. Third time, they still mess up on the third time. Written warning.
yeah. It was really good. Yeah, and really, really. So what we want to do here is that people want to get clear on the information, especially in like nutritional example and a business context, is get clear on the data. Yeah. Like what I always say, data and drama. Have you done lots of calls? Yes, I've done lots of calls. Drama. Have you done lots of calls? Yes, I've done 25 calls. That's data. That's what we want to do to get rid of the first level of lying. Okay, let's move in. Second level of lying. Lying from a place of guilt and shame. Okay. So this type of lying comes from to protect myself from the pain of the reality. Yeah.
Okay, so this is probably more of the status one.
Yeah.
Like if like if I say, Ben, how many sales have you made this week, revenue wise? And you're like, oh fuck, like, oh Pete, it's 100 grand. Where it's not, it's 50,
Yeah.
but you feel shame over not doing 100.
Yeah,
You're
and I'll be honest.
exaggerating.
Like that, I had weeks where if I've had a bad sales week, I would try and count some of last week's sales that have rolled into maybe the day like Sunday where they come in or something like that. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll count them, and that is again, it's lying. But because it's coming from guilt and shame, it's like, oh my God, I'm really shameful. And actually, if I would have just said to Pete, and this isn't an example, a real example, but in those moments, I'd say, hey man, listen, I'm really ashamed that I've not made a sale. He can do something about that. He can do something with that. He can actually help me. He can go, dude, how can I help you? If I'm bullshitting him as my business partner, as my colleague, or as my friend, or whatever, that's when the real problem exists. Like, think about this. It's like if you're lying to someone from a place of shame that you're struggling emotionally, and you're lying to people around you, and then all of a sudden you're borderline depressed, suicidal, anxious, whatever, they can't help you. But it's the same in business. If you're messing up and you're making mistakes and you're not telling the people around you, nobody can help you, and it's going to make the problem 10 times harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just going back to that sales example, if you said to me, Pete, I've done 100 grand in sales, and I'm like, great, top work, mate, lovely. It goes out of my head. I'm not thinking, right, there's a sales problem. I'm on to the next problem that we've got. I'm not even thinking about that. But actually, if that isn't a lie or an exaggeration, that there is a problem, and I don't know about that problem, so nothing can be done about it.
And that's it. And so there's 3 ways. I think there's 3 ways. Yeah, there's 2 ways that we massage the truth in this space, right? So first of all, like Pete said there, we exaggerate. So Pete was around at mine a couple of weeks ago, it's about 2-3 months ago. And I said about how much my barbecue cost. And Poppy was like, no, it didn't cost that much. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it actually
I
really
remember
did. And we
that.
had this, yeah, I know, it's a good example, right? And it was like, oh my God, I was worried that I did exaggerated and lied about it. And I was like, no, it really was actually that expensive. And I had to go and check. I had to go and check the email to make sure I hadn't told a whopper of an exaggeration. It's that important to me because what I did. I massaged the truth. And this is where I found myself with the biggest bits of shame. I was like, do you know what? Why am I doing this? And Pete said before, status. It was status. I was when it's like, okay. So it's just starting to like look at the exaggerations. Oh, it's a harmless exaggeration. But that exaggeration can become problematic. It's still a lie. And the second one is withholding. And this is actually a bit more corrosive, is that we had a guy called Bernard, I think it is, he pronounces it, Ryan Gruber, who did a session with us called Radical Honesty. Now, radical honesty, it means honesty from the core. And Brad Blanton, the guy who wrote the book Radical Honesty, says that withholding information is keeping back information from someone through fear about what they will and how they'll interpret it. Now, this is what a lot of people actually go through their life with a real big issue with, just withholding their feelings, withholding information, not sharing, and they get so stressed around this. And like what I've observed in the Awakened Man over the last, say, 2 years is this is the big breakthrough that a lot of guys have. They stop withholding information about their feelings, their numbers, and they start to let go of this. And this is what causes the big change. Massive.
Oh well, it's freeing.
Yeah.
It's not only
Yeah.
it's not only freeing. There'll be so much benefit that will come from that because the truth is then told, and then, like we said earlier with the sales example, like you not only feel free because you told the truth there, but we can then go and find a solution to the problem if there was a problem.
Yeah, and that's what I notice sometimes. The guys just on a Friday come around, they share some shit, and then it's like, oh, it's irrelevant now. It's not even a problem anymore. I can move through it. And so this is the real part of lying, is withholding. And actually, this is something that goes under the radar. It's like, well, if I'm not saying anything, it doesn't even make it a lie. And I had this thing with clients. Instead of telling me they had a drinking problem or a binge eating problem or have 5 cans and then have a cheese board and have a thing problem, they would just withhold it. And then then they'd step on the scales in the weighing room, and they were like, I can't understand. I can't understand why I've gained weight. I can't understand it. I've been training all week. It must be something to do with the training. And they'd try and get me to focus. They would try and lead me and manipulate me to try and focus on the training. And I was like, hang on a second, the training is fine. Let's look at this. I even had clients that would withhold information, and they would even try and like get really, really granular with like how many calories there were in blueberries. And I was like, it's not a fucking blueberry that is making you gain weight, hun. You know, like that was, do you get what I mean? It was like that. So it's like someone talk about their sales and they're like, oh yeah, but I'm sure it's my Facebook profile picture that's the issue. It's like, no, it's the freaking, you're not picking up the goddamn phone. And so I watch that behavior quite a lot, and it all comes from a place of withholding. Again, the stuff I'm sharing on today's podcast will make you a fucking great consultant, because if you can get clear on the truth for people, it's going to really, 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 really help. Yeah. So sometimes, it's just been able to say this, as if there's a whole bunch of bullshit that we're buying into here. And that really would make a massive shift for people. The third level of lying is lying to save someone's feelings. Now, what these are called is little white lies. Now, listen to the phrasing that this is given. It's termed a little white lie, a little pure lie. It's lying from purity, as if we're absorbed from guilt and the nature of lying because it's saving someone's feelings. Oh, Pete, you know, I don't want to tell you this, but I'm going to tell a little white lie. But I might be denying Pete of something he really needs to know. Like before the podcast started, Pete was saying, Ben, take a breath. And I could have asked Pete, oh, what do you think of the way I talk on the podcast? He's like, yeah, mate, it's great. It's absolutely brilliant. Again, he dropped into radical candor. He goes, Ben, take a breath. You notice there are larger pauses in today's podcast. but that's the thing, right? Is that when we're lying, we can deny our friends and loved ones access to the reality, and the resultant ignorance can harm them in ways we cannot anticipate. And that's from Sam Harris. Yeah, is that we could actually be doing our friends a real service by telling them the truth, but we hold it back, we withhold it, and then we're trying to save someone's feelings.
Yeah. Like from an employment standpoint, if you've had enough of someone like in your team and it's like, right, final straw, that's it, that they're out, we're going to let them go. And then you let them go, and then you don't tell them the truth as to why you're letting them go. And maybe you tell some little white lies to sugarcoat it and wrap it in cotton wool. But then they go on to the next employer, and they'll make the same mistakes. And then they'll get sacked there as well. And then they move on to the next and make the same mistakes. Whereas if you're truthful about it, maybe they can make a change there and then not make the same mistakes as they move on with life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually that's compassion. What was people talking about then is compassion. That's real compassion. Saying to someone who's actually leaving your team, hey, listen, I need to tell you why you're going. Not because of what it's going to do for me, but what it's going to do for you. This is an example. So a friend of mine who's got 20% body fat says, listen, hey man, am I overweight? I would reply straight, like, dude, no one would actually call you fat, but you obviously got some fat to lose. Now, how would it work with Poppy, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that she'll turn to me and she says, do I look fat in this dress? Like, do I look fat in this? Like, how do I look in this? And she doesn't do it to seek my approval, but there's what's called the overt and the covert conversation. So if Poppy is asking me, do I look fat in this dress, is a real question. If the subtext is asking, do you love me? Can you reassure me? I'm always going to say, listen, I love you no matter what you're wearing. And I can literally, I'm very good at that. I'm very well trained. I can hear it. But if she asks me, have I put on weight? And it's in the context of we've both been indulging and we've both done our body fats and they've gone up, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to be yes. We've both put on weight. And the thing is that if I don't say yes in that occasion and then she goes and verifies that by stepping on the scales or looking in the mirror and she doesn't, it means that it becomes a lie for her. And so it's a real nuance, that one. It's a real subtlety, but this is where you've got to be really, really clear about data over drama. So by offering a reassurance in the moment, I'm actually not helping her in that situation because I said, oh, no, you haven't put any fat on, It doesn't help her, okay? So sometimes we've got to be what's called like tough love. Give them tough love because it's really important. So in the last 5 minutes, because we are actually just going straight into our hot seat today. Did you want to share anything on that one, Pete, before we jump off?
No, but you're right. There is nuances on that, and I think that's a biggie because it's so easy, especially to your partner, your missus, just to tell a little white lie, just to stay in the good books and not hurt their feelings. But actually, doing it like you've just explained there is subtle and is the right way, and it's the truth.
Yeah. And I think that it's like I've learned a lot from this over the years. Like, even when I was making this document, I was like, actually, I can come back to a lot of this. Okay, so the final part is like some possible solutions to lying. So if this has really triggered you and you actually have got real present the fact that you're telling some lies, good. This is what it's for. The second thing is you're not alone. The reason I know this so well is I've really looked into this with clients, with myself, and with people I coach and consult with. And then what I've learned over the years in terms of things and places you can go to work on your lying. The first one is Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton. It's just a really good book. It's just about being honest about what you notice in front of you in your body and in the present moment. It's a very present. Like Pete actually uses this tool before he speaks. Really powerful. Settles the audience down. Really, really powerful. The second one, go and listen to our Radical Candor podcast, because we go into how to deliver care personally challenged directly truth telling. It's really, really good. And the thing about the other one is getting really, really good at telling the truth and let it hurt. It's okay that it hurts sometimes. And when we get really clear on the data, like if you are finding that you're lying about your data, get really truthful around your data over the next couple of weeks, and you'll notice a massive shift in your life, in your body fat, in your health, in your sales. Is get really clear on the data, not the drama. And so that's it. That's like, you're lying 101.
Let me tell a quick truth, not lie. Guys, if you like this podcast, can you do us a massive favor? Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. And then if you're on Instagram, just share it on your story and tag us in it at the Awakened Man Project. The reason why we want to grow this podcast to be the #1 self-development podcast in the industry. Right, we got into the top 100. We want to get into the top 50 next. We want to make it as big as we can.
Yeah, let's try and do it before
giving
the
us a
year's out.
review. Yeah, give us a review. Quick share really, really helps. Helps another man.
Yeah, and I think, feel free to share with us on the Awaken Man Project Instagram which particular thing, that you heard in today's podcast really resonated with you. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Cheers, guys.